Okay, this is the 6th of December, 2016, and our topic for today is the consequences of Donald Trump's electoral victory on the future of U.S. foreign policy. This is called Athens Speakout, number 391. The moderator is Steve Andel, who will ask each of us 2-minute questions. The first question to Dave DeWitt, who is the publisher and editor and chief journalist for the Athens News. And he's going to talk, if he wants to, on why Trump won and why Hillary lost.
Okay, you want to give me that sheet, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have any further comments on that?
Do I have further comments?
Or do you want to pass?
Well, I'll let you start this time. I think I've
okay.
started the past 2 times.
All right. Well, then I will say I have an additional comment on why Trump won and why Hillary lost. I discovered a new source that has been overlooked by the New York Times and the Washington Post and the fans of Hillary Clinton. I discovered a young assistant professor by the name of Oka Elliott, who added that the pundits have underestimated the importance of the Roman Catholic bloc, and Trump won a majority of the Catholic voters on the abortion issue and the birth control issue, and he seems to have been decisive in allowing the Trump-Pence ticket to win a majority of the Catholic votes. Now, Elliott himself is a Catholic and illustrates how the Catholic Church has gained considerable influence since the 1950s. And Clinton and the New York Times and the Washington Post are optimists and should not have been surprised by Trump's performance with Catholics. And then this assistant professor, Professor Elliott, goes back to 1964, when the Republicans under Goldwater chose William Miller, Republican, from the House of Representatives, a forgotten and unknown Catholic vice presidential candidate. And up to 2016, all of the elections, there have been 7 Catholic vice presidential candidates in either of the parties, Republican or Democratic parties, because of the importance of the Catholic vote. And in the last election,
Robert, Joseph Biden is a Catholic, isn't he?
Joseph Biden is one of the 7.
Okay.
Yeah. And Joseph Biden was one. And but in the last election, both parties nominated a Catholic. Tim Kaine from Virginia was a Catholic for Hillary, and the Vice President, Michael Pence, was a Catholic for Donald Trump. So we had 2 Catholics. But the Catholic Church, the Vatican, is very good at picking the winner. They want to go with the winner. And that is determined by the foreign trade debt. And the foreign trade debt has not been discussed by Trump yet. And that's another issue of how the foreign trade debt links in to foreign policy problems. So I guess I ought to end with that comment.
Yeah. David, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think that's it's interesting, the research that Mr. Elliott, or Professor Elliott, has done here. I had not seen that before. It's a little surprising to me, I suppose, considering, Well, I guess Mike Pence is nominally Catholic as well. He would describes himself as an evangelical Catholic.
He's a new breed. Nobody's
Which
ever said that
yeah,
before.
I'm not sure exactly what he means by
I
that.
think
It's
he's
not
basically
it's not a
Catholic, and he
construction that I've ever heard.
he added the evangelical in order to get votes.
But I know that Tim Kaine is a very committed Catholic.
He's closer to the real Catholic Church.
Right. And I know that despite some fake news reports that were going around before the election, Pope Francis, Papa Francesco, as I like to call him, did not endorse Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton.
No, he has to stay neutral in the United States.
He did.
The Pope has always been neutral.
And that's what he said.
But behind the scenes, they pick a winner.
Yeah, and well, it's interesting to me that
Through money.
Donald Trump has claimed that global warming, man-made climate change, is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese.
Right.
But Papa Francesco has been very vocal.
That's right.
About
I think the Vatican,
the dangers of climate change.
The Vatican has more scientific, educated priests than.
Well, and I think that's true, and I also think that it's that old line, when you're dealing with the Catholic Church, they think in centuries.
That's true.
Into the future. They don't deal in presidential election cycles. They deal in centuries. As far as
well, they have two programs.
The
immediate election, the next 4 years, and then the next 20 years.
Yeah. So
or until as long as Francis stays on the throne.
Right.
And then they'll have to find a new pope, and they're already speculating on that.
I don't know. Well, we've already seen Donald Trump walk back a lot of his remarks. And a lot of his stump speech campaigning. So I guess we'll see where he goes on this global warming thing, because I know that Ivanka, his daughter, has expressed an interest in combating climate change. So I'm kind of curious as to how all this will play out in the long run.
We don't know.
Robert,
we don't know. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Mr. Elliott. What school and...
Okay, well, he went to he got a pretty good degree from Princeton somewhere, but he's only an assistant professor. He's very young.
Yeah.
And he teaches at some minor college I never heard of. I'll have to, I don't think I put it down, but it's sort of like Massaquoddy or some such Indian name. Yeah. And it's in a small town that I never heard of either. Yeah. It's in Dallas, Pennsylvania. Yeah. A new school just started, and he's got a new job, and I've never heard of Dallas, Pennsylvania. Have you ever been to Dallas, Pennsylvania?
No, but I think I've seen the signs for it off of the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Yeah, it begins with an M. It sounds like Massaquoddy or some such.
I know what you're talking about. Actually, I've seen that name of that school before.
I never heard of it, and I'm supposed to be in academia. I suppose the school was founded in the last 20 years.
Small school, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I want to point out that there's 79 million Catholics in America.
79 million?
Yeah, according to The Atlantic at least. And they did support President Barack Obama in both of his elections.
Atlantic Monthly supported Barack Obama.
No, Catholics did. The Atlantic reported
the Atlantic
Catholics.
Monthly, yeah, right. That's
by
true.
Small margins, they say.
Right.
Twice they voted for Obama, but not by big margins.
Right. And Obama won the 2 elections. That was another winner for them.
Right.
For the Catholic Church.
Yes,
so
that's true.
That's part of the data of this Elliott.
Oh, really? The Catholic Church is selecting. I mean, apparently they're a good bellwether because they seem to be selecting the winner.
I'm going to throw this in here, and you can answer it if you want to. The women's vote was what I was talking about. They said that, we heard projections that the women would not vote for Donald Trump.
That was Hillary's propaganda.
But they did. They did vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and you know why?
Go ahead, explain it.
What Hillary Clinton made a mistake, and all of the Democrats make the mistake of paying attention to the single women. And they
We
keep,
can see David DeWitt now.
There you go.
yeah, they keep talking about gay liberation, gays, bisexual, so forth. Nobody in Southeast Ohio knows what those initials mean. And if they do, they would vote against it. All you have to do is read.
In the college.
Yeah, in other words, she's speaking to a small segment
That's true.
of people who go to Wellesley College.
That's true.
She's not talking to the masses of disaffected voters
Yeah.
who are voting for Trump. Well, anyway, the married women feel threatened. They have children.
Right.
And the idea of promoting homosexuality among their kids is a taboo. They're loyal Catholics, or they're loyal Protestants, or they're loyal Christians of some kind. And Hillary's Methodism is somewhat shady compared to... Now, Presbyterian. Trump had one sound Presbyterian argument. The economic argument. Yeah. He has Calvinism. Money counts. Yeah. Save your money. That's right. Presbyterian's one plank, Calvinism. Right. That's called the Protestant work ethic. It's also called the Calvinist work ethic, yeah. But of course it was originally the Jewish work ethic.
Right. Exactly.
I was raised Catholic, and I want to point out that of the Catholics that I was raised with and the many Catholics that I know and grew up with are far more liberal, especially in their social politics, than the church catechism would call for.
That's true.
I don't believe that.
But married women are not your group. You are a male, single male.
I'm talking about all the Catholics that I grew up with tend to be much more liberal and open-minded in their social ideas and their social tolerances than what the official church doctrine. And even Papa Francisco himself has shown a high degree of openness and open-mindedness and tolerance.
He's talking about revising. He's revising the doctrine, but they're talking.
So
about
I don't think that those social identity politics played nearly as big a role for the white working class rural American voters that Trump won as much did their economic status. I don't think that identity politics were the big issue in the minds of a lot of Americans this year.
That's your opinion, and you are entitled to that opinion, but the statistics don't bear out your opinion.
What you mean, because the majority of Catholics supported Trump?
Something like 30% of the Catholic women.
And that's fine. But how do you tie that 30% vote directly
the statistics are there.
to social issues,
End of the discussion. End of the discussion.
Let me interrupt.
Debate is the oxygen of democracy. We can suss this out a little bit.
You have given your opinion.
Now, you say that 30% of Catholics voted for Catholic women, whatever your statistic is. How do you tie that to social issues?
Well, what do you mean by social?
How do you know that those Catholics were voting on social issues?
How do you know what social issues are? What is a social issue?
How do you know that they were voting on LGBT rights and not their economic situation?
Okay.
Yeah, what I think David's trying to point out is you don't know whether or not they voted for the LGBT against it, or were they voting for him because of economic reasons. Is that what you're trying to say?
That is what I'm saying.
All right, what I would say, common sense. Common sense.
Right.
How many Protestant or Catholic women who have children are welcoming gay liberation for their own kids?
Probably.
I think it's a generational thing.
Probably.
Okay. According to...
But I don't think that's why they were voting on. I don't think that even Donald Trump said that he wasn't going to.
You can think anything you want.
Even Donald Trump said that he wasn't planning on overturning the same-sex marriage rights.
End of discussion. You can think anything you want.
Well, I do. Thank you.
Fine.
I don't need your permission for that.
Okay. Now, can I give some statistics?
Go ahead, Robert.
According to wait a minute, according to NPR, National Public Radio, according to their pundit, who is a Roman Catholic, by the way, he was born in Massachusetts. His name is, he's been on the air for 20 years.
Ira Plato.
No, not Ira Plato. I'm just trying to think now.
Bob Edwards.
No. He debates with every Friday they have a debate between Republicans and the Catholics, okay? Between the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah.
And this guy is a former Marine. He came from Massachusetts, a former supporter of John Kennedy. He was there when the Massachusetts Catholic came out of the closet. The Massachusetts Jew came out of the Catholic. You know who I mean. Barney Frank.
Barney Frank.
Okay. And what did he say? You know who I mean.
Yeah.
He said, in this last election, those who are homosexuals of any kind are no more than 5% of the population. Now, those are his statistics, and I think he has a sound ground for those statistics. Now, you can have your opinion that he's wrong,
Right.
but that's why I think we should end the debate.
Okay.
I'll just note that Catholics voted for Barack Obama 2 times, so I don't think that identity politics explains the Trump vote with regard to Catholics.
Okay. Now, why they voted for Obama is because of the black issue. The black issue is not the same as the homosexual issue.
Now, what was it? I'm just asking questions as far as percentage-wise. I know you guys probably have the statistics. I was told that the black population did not turn out to vote this time.
Not
It
in
did in the Obama administration.
not in the same number or amount that they
Right.
did in 2008 or 2012, and the same can be said as millennials, young people,
Yeah,
didn't show up in as
yeah.
big in numbers either.
Yeah.
Neither group showed up in as big as numbers, and women didn't show up for Hillary the way that they did
what
for
kind of
Obama, and
numbers
they
did
went over to
Johnson
Trump.
and Stein receive? Do you recall?
Oh, I don't know what their exact percentage is now. I know that I've read that in some of these battleground states, such as Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, Stein did receive more votes than the margin of difference between Hillary and Trump. So that means that if she weren't running, for instance, and if Hillary captured all of those Green Party votes, then she might have beaten Trump in some of those states.
Robert, do you have any additional comments on why Trump won and Hillary lost?
Well, I was originally talking about foreign policy,
Okay, go right ahead.
and I don't think that I thought we had finished the sex issue last time.
Okay.
So that's why I forgot the name of these pundits.
I wasn't here last
Okay.
time, so.
Okay. And we had John Burnham on here,
Yeah.
and we've talked about that many times. And supposedly, David and I have had that debate many, many weeks. I think it's old hat myself.
Okay.
Okay. So go on to foreign policy. Trump said that the foreign trade debts have not yet been discussed by Trump, but the foreign trade interlocks with foreign policy problems. Trump has not yet finalized his cabinet. Trump told lies about China Mexico, and the Middle East, it has been alleged that Trump may have been leaning toward fascism, and a review of Hitler and Mussolini at this point may be helpful. Hitler and Mussolini in 1922 and 23 proved that people who are unemployed and employed at minimum wages will vote for a demagogue who sounds confident that he can fix their job problems. The middle class of Germany and Italy lost their savings from 1920 to 23 because of war debts. Hitler allied himself to Japan and Italy in 1936 and put pressure on the Soviet Union under the ideological program of anti-communism. The early Hitler from 1933 to September 1939, when he invaded Poland, used coercive diplomatic programs to intervene in the Spanish Civil War, 1936-39, to install General Francisco Franco in power. This operation was important to cement the Axis relationship between Mussolini and Hitler. Those two powers were already fighting in a limited, underreported war during the Spanish Civil War against the Soviet Union, which was confidentially backing the Spanish Republic and the friendly French Third Republic. Now, French diplomacy in the years 1933 to 39 had difficulty in finding reliable allies. They knew from the last war that the next war was to be expected when Hitler was ready to militarily attack France. Although the French had no overall alliance system against Hitler, they had bilateral relationships with 7 friendly countries. But France had limited treaties with Britain to protect the frontier at the Rhine River. But Britain would not support French intervention with France's allies in Eastern Europe in order to have a united coalition against Hitler. So Hitler's peaceful diplomacy from 1933 was to annex Austria and March 1938, when the British and the Italians and the Soviets were busy stumbling over the unresolved Spanish Civil War. Hitler's next famous coercive diplomatic coup was to fool Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain at the Munich conference, who was dedicated to avoiding an all-out war with Germany at all costs. Chamberlain fell for Hitler's propaganda of anti-communism. In fact, Hitler used coercion to annex the German-speaking province of Czechoslovakia, known as the Sudetenland. And Chamberlain promised to the British people on the radio that the Sudetenland would be Hitler's last territorial claim. The Munich Agreement was signed September 30th, 1938, and Chamberlain oversold the successful preservation of peace to the British public opinion. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, or Member of Parliament, not Prime Minister, Member of Parliament, MP Winston Churchill, in opposition in a left-wing faction of the Tory party, predicted that Hitler would violate the Munich Agreement in 6 months. And he voted in the House of Commons with about 130 other members not to ratify Chamberlain's Four-Power Pact signed at Munich. As predicted, in March of 1939, Hitler had been in Austria and was able to subvert the old German-speaking province of Austria's Habsburg monarchy. And in Czechoslovakia, that province was known as Bohemia. And Hitler, the leader of the Third Reich, simply denounced the isolated Czechoslovak state that was no longer had any defensive alliances, resign, and restore Prague as the traditional capital of German Bohemia. The third province of the declining Czechoslovak state was inhabited by super-conservative reactionary Slovaks who proclaimed that the technical independence from the dying Czechoslovak state wasn't independent. He just proclaimed it was technically independent. The fact was that Slovakian independence was a myth because of his economic weakness. In fact, Slovakia became a pro-Axis satellite state, joining Admiral Horthy's pro-German ally Hungary. So that what Hitler was doing is reconstituting the old Habsburg monarchy through subversion, because he already had lots of fascist Nazi-type sympathizers in all of those states. All of the great powers in Europe then, the USSR, France, Britain, and Italy, all predicted that sometime in September of 1939, Hitler would invade Poland. And Hitler did so on the 1st of September 1939, and Germany was confronted with Britain and France on the 3rd of September with a declaration of war, which was a treaty of honor with Poland, declared war on Hitler. Militarily, Hitler was well prepared for the war and quickly knocked out Poland militarily in 17 days. Hitler rested over the winter of 1939, and in April of 1940 attacked Denmark and Norway. After a month of combat in Norway, Hitler launched his Operation Yellow, invading Holland and Luxembourg and Belgium, and the French knocking out the British allies in 6 weeks. France was knocked out of the war, and Britain was left alone. So the heroic new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, fought on against Hitler alone in an air war from September 1940 to the spring of 1941. In June of 1941, Hitler overreached militarily and invaded the Soviet Union, which led to the long Russian-German War lasting 3 years, in which Germany was on the offensive in the summer, and the Soviets made a counteroffensive in the fall and the winter. The decisive Battle of Stalingrad from August 1942 to February 1943 changed the military balance of power from the German offense to Germany's retreat, because it was a defensive war in the summer of 1943 on into the summer of 1944, when the Soviets reconquered Warsaw, Poland from the declining Third Reich. Soviet armies, joining General Eisenhower and General Bernard Montgomery on the Western Front, closed in on Germany. Stalin's generals were the first to capture Adolf Hitler's bunker in Berlin on the very first day of May 1945. Meanwhile, Hitler's ally, Japan, was aided Hitler's diplomacy in Europe from 1937 to 40 and used the European War as an opportunity to expand the Japanese Empire into mainland China from July 1937 to October 1938. The Chinese Defensive Army founded a new capital in the hills up the Yangtze River in Chongqing, while the Japanese army was satisfied in controlling most of China's industrial and commercial properties on the Chinese coast.
I believe Steve has a question.
Break.
Station break.
Yeah, okay. This is Robert Whaley, historian, who is talking about the deficiencies of Trump. And what we're saying is that Trump doesn't have a clue of why the Americans, the British, and the Soviets won World War II after great, great battles with Hitler. And my colleague is Dave DeWitt, who is from the Athens News, and he could interrupt here at any time about foreign policy if he has any questions.
I just wanted to say something about
Yeah.
the end of Hitler and going into the Russia in the wintertime. There was a guy I heard on the radio who mentioned that there was two types of mistakes that you can make. One is that you don't tie your shoes, that type of mistake. And the other mistake is when you try to invade the Soviet Union in the wintertime.
Yes.
He was making the...
Yeah, okay. Well, Napoleon was defeated in the Soviet Union, actually in November, rather early.
Yeah.
And when he got to Moscow...
But his reason wasn't because of the supply train or whatever, that, you know, they couldn't get supplies to his troops, the German tanks and all that, could they? Or they get
all right,
stuck
well, you're
in
going
snow?
back to 1941, 42, 43.
Okay.
Okay, the importance of the Battle of Stalingrad is that it's on the Volga River, and the Volga River is the Mississippi River of Russia and the Soviet Union.
Right.
And the United States was sending Lend-Lease through Iran by railway up through the Caspian Sea, and then it goes up through the Volga River all the way to Moscow, and all of these supplies are delivered up as far north as Moscow.
Yeah.
But Hitler had the idea, if you can cut this lifeline at Stalingrad and you conquer Stalingrad, that'll cut off the Lend-Lease, and also you can keep on moving south west into, southeast into Russia and go to the Balkans and get the oil.
Yeah.
So Hitler's first offensive in 1941 was Moscow. And his second offensive was down toward Stalingrad and the Balkans in order to get natural resources and cut off the American supplies. That was his strategy.
Yeah.
But Stalin had a counter strategy. We have to hold on Stalingrad just as much as Adolf Hitler has to conquer Stalingrad. And he had his Soviet troops. You fight to the death of your last man, and if you retreat, we have machine guns there, you're not going to retreat.
Yeah.
You either fight the Germans or you'll be shot in the back.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he won the Battle of Stalingrad through brute force.
Yeah, I guess so.
And Hitler's armies were surrounded by Soviet tanks from the north and the south. This is when the winter comes and the snows come.
Yeah.
And these men were cut off. And Hitler said to von Paulus, don't surrender. You can't come back to Germany if you surrender. But he surrendered. Yeah. And I don't know, something like 200,000 men surrendered. 100,000 men surrendered with 900 tanks and airplanes and so forth and so on. And then the Soviet Union had the rest of the winter to push the front back into the Ukraine.
I have a question for
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Well, as long as we're talking about authoritarian demagogues, one of the striking dissimilarities to me, Hitler was a committed ideologue.
That's true.
Trump doesn't seem to have any commitment to any ideology,
That's true. Absolutely
beyond
true.
his own ego, as
That's
far as
right.
I can tell. Could you point to another historical example where there wasn't a driving ideology? It was just an authoritarian or a person who evinces authoritarian principles, such as Donald Trump,
Okay.
who was driven mostly out of ego more than anything else, it seems?
Well, the United States foreign policy, from George Washington's day to Franklin Roosevelt's day, was based on the balance of power. Washington, Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, under Woodrow Wilson, all used the balance of power, which they inherited from Great Britain, because Great Britain had a balance of power, and how it became the number one empire, defeating the Spanish Empire, defeating the French Empire, and then the German Empire began to challenge them in World War I and in World War II. So the British had to have Russia as an ally in both world wars so that the Germans would have a two-front war. Mm-hmm. But the balance of power is based on geography. The British geography is the English Channel is the number one interest. So England has had many friends and many enemies, and England has never had permanent friends, and she's never had permanent enemies. They are willing to change the balance of power for the purposes of the English Channel. Now, the United States, from Washington to Franklin Roosevelt, had the Atlantic Ocean as their English Channel, and they were never really threatened by any European power. And it was England that drew the United States into World War I and in World War II, because the British don't have enough men to sustain the overpopulated or the relatively high population of Germany. Besides, the Germans rapidly industrialized from 1890, and they had a better army and air force than the British had. So the British had to have allies. That's the importance of the balance of power. And ideology is not very important to the British. Ideology became the number one problem of the United States in 1945 when they won the war. And Truman then was forced into anti-communism by the Republican Party, who was more anti-communist than anti-fascist. And then Eisenhower got a little bit deeper into it. And then we went whole hog with Lyndon Baines Johnson, and Richard Nixon, who had ideology as their sole purpose in foreign policy, because they never understood the balance of power. They were just dumb. Now, Henry Kissinger bailed Nixon out because he said to Nixon, "You cannot win in Indochina."
Right, and he opened China up. What we've seen recently, which only Henry Kissinger and Nixon could have done, and that lasted for about 4 decades. Now, in just the past week, the one China policy in American diplomacy, where we weren't recognizing Taiwan.
Right. That's right.
Now, just this past week, we have the president-elect taking a phone call from the Taiwanese president.
Very stupid.
It seems like either he did it intentionally as a provocation of China, or he did it out of ignorance.
He did it, I think, ignorance.
Either way, it's
dumb.
a provocation of China. What do you make of that as far as what it speaks to the balance of power?
I don't think Trump will be reelected in the second term. He will either be impeached or there'll be...
Robert, he's going to be 74 years old. I doubt that he'll run the second term.
Do you think that there's... do you think that the way that he's starting off his foreign policy posture with this provocation of China...
Starting off on the wrong foot.
Do you think that that's going to upset the balance of power as it is now? I mean, we have There was a piece in the Atlantic,
Okay,
and I
well,
should email this to
okay,
you. It's called the
there-
Thucydides trap of the rising
okay.
power versus the established
After
power.
Kissinger's retirement, who did we have? George
Oh, yeah,
George
Schultz,
Bush. No, George Bush.
as
The-
director of the CIA.
No. Who was the president? That was the.
Oh, in
Who was the president who got involved in 2000?
George W.
2000.
Bush.
Yeah, he didn't have a clue
Yeah.
of what the balance of power. He was interested in oil.
Right.
He was interested in the money. The Republican Party is interested in the money. Every Republican in Congress wants to cut taxes, expand the oil empire. And they're now talking about a guy by the name of Tilson who's going to be the Secretary of State for the Standard Oil Company. He's going to run it.
Oh, yeah. I've
He's
seen
going to
that.
run the United States into the
Yeah.
ground.
Look at George Bush 43. Who was his vice president? Dick Cheney, the head of Halliburton.
Yeah, right.
You know,
That's not the balance of power.
So what is Trump's motivation in provoking China?
Well, Trump starts out with the idea that the Democrats do not understand that Mexico is a problem. They do not understand that Mexican immigration can go on forever. That's
Right.
Trump's theory.
And he spent the campaign
And he
villainizing
he
both
said-
Mexico and China.
He said, well, the first thing I'm going to do is get Mexico to build a wall, and we're going to stop Mexicans from coming. Well, that's a kind of a ideological program as far as Mexico is concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. Then he
Yeah,
says,
it's chum for the
then
for the masses.
he doesn't understand the global picture at all. He says, well, there's a problem with China. They're stealing our industry. So he's
Right.
going to take care of China. Well, now, how does he take care of China?
That's what I'm wondering.
He says, I'm going to impose a tariff.
Well, that's going to hurt America.
Yeah.
That's going to hurt the
He doesn't
American
know what a tariff
economy.
is.
Right.
He's going to impose a tariff on American industry to stop investing in China. If you invest in China, you can't bring your money back.
That could spur a recession, as far as what
I think it will.
Right.
I think Trump is in terrible problems.
So you think he's just bumbling around, really?
I think he's bumbling around, yes.
yeah. I was just going to say about China. I mean, Robert, you probably read that too. I don't know that David reads the New York Times. He probably does, but do you recall about where they're building the new Cadillacs in China? They've got the most. They say that this is the most sophisticated automobile manufacturing plants in the world. You know, of course, the General Motors, but the Chinese economy is already on the skids.
It has trouble. I don't know if it's on the skids. It has trouble.
Well, the whole thing is the market for those cars, it's in decline, you know, even though the GM's just dumped all this money into China.
Well, they made a poor investment then.
Oh, well, I'm sure it is.
I think the Chinese have read the American newspaper, and they see that Trump hasn't been elected.
Yeah.
Now, there's a problem with the Chinese money, the renminbi. It's pegged to the American dollar. And every time the American dollar goes up through inflation, the renminbi goes up.
Yeah.
And the Chinese were banking on exporting cheap Chinese cars.
Yeah, I don't know that the Chinese, I don't know if they're buying Cadillacs over there or if all those cars are being exported. But now over here in this town, the finest cars in town are driven by Chinese students,
Yeah,
but
right.
most of them are German.
Okay, well, the Chinese have,
themselves,
what,
yeah.
1.5 billion people?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And I think there are maybe 2,000? No, 20,000, about 2 million. 2 million Chinese who are very rich,
Yeah.
and they can drive these cars in Beijing.
Yeah.
But Beijing and China is running out of airspace, and they're choking to death. So these rich Chinese are coming to California and buying houses there, and they're going to retire in California.
Yeah.
That's their idea.
Yeah,
They're going to
matter of
infiltrate the
fact,
United States.
Matter of fact, when I was living out there, they would bring them in on and do a bus tour.
Right.
And they would just go through these Southern California residential areas and see houses that were for sale.
And some of them,
And they'd just say, well, how much do you want for that? Well, if it was $850,000, they bought it.
Right.
They
Right.
didn't try to get it for
Right.
$750,000.
Right.
They
Right.
paid
right,
$850,000.
right.
So yeah, all over Southern California. From
And
LA
they're
down
doing
to San
that
Diego,
in New York
wow.
and in Las Vegas and in Seattle. But they're not vesting in Southeast Ohio.
They're primarily staying on the West Coast.
Primarily West Coast first.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
I
know.
think it should also be noted that they hold, I think, over $1.7 trillion of U.S. Treasury bonds.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's a very. That's a very important thing. That
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to be putting too much pressure on them because
It would spell economic catastrophe.
exactly.
Do you think Trump's aware of that? I don't know.
I don't think Trump
I
is
don't think
aware.
anybody's told him yet or not.
Well,
Right.
he hasn't yet come up with a Secretary of State. He's been talking about Petraeus and this brand new guy, Tillerson, I never heard of before.
Neither have I. I was only heartened when I heard that he was considering John Huntsman,
Yeah.
who served as Obama's ambassador
this
to China.
was in today's headline here.
But
Here it is. Secretary Search turns to Tillerson.
I haven't
That's in
seen this yet.
Yeah, it's in today's.
It ought to say who Tillerson is.
Yeah, I'm going to say he's the chairman of Exxon Mobil, CEO. Okay,
Well,
and he's worth in the billions. Okay, and he's going to get all the Republican. He's going to get all the Republican. He's
Heirs cabinets.
the
Seems
Republican
to be what
Party
he's putting together.
will nominate him. He's not going to have any trouble to get the nomination if that's who Trump wants. But I'm not sure Trump wants him. Trump doesn't know who he wants.
Well, John Huntsman ran for president on the Republican side, didn't he, one year?
I believe he did back in 2008 maybe or something, or maybe 2012. 2012, yeah.
So,
Well, they were talking about Giuliani, but he's a guy who wants more torture.
Well, yeah. Well, there was Giuliani and Petraeus and Mitt Romney, and then they opened it up even further to John Bolton and
Okay.
John Huntsman, and now apparently this
Yeah,
Tillerson
the
guy.
Secretary Search turns to Tillerson. Yeah, I just got this today. Okay. And what does the fine print say?
But the BBC ran a story about how so far Trump's cabinet is the richest cabinet in American history. It's all
And then it
millionaires
says
and
that the
billionaires.
CEO has views on the climate change. Has views on the climate change.
what
That's-
are those views?
Well, he knows as an oil man that
Oh, yes.
pollution is real, and he knows that China needs to have climate change, and he knows that Obama is right on climate change. There's got to be some kind of a treaty on that.
You know, Robert, when we did the story on who killed the electric car, we were trying to determine, who actually did kill them. I was never able to determine who put it out of business. I think it was several different groups.
I think it was an experiment for General Motors. They discovered that the experiment wouldn't work.
Well, no, I think it worked too well. I mean, those cars, there was a very low maintenance, and the people loved them. And did you ever see that movie?
Oh, they
I
have.
never saw the movie, but I have
They
followed
have-
the
they have-
developments,
they have-
especially the work
whole
of
thing
Elon
was-
Musk.
My point was, in that when we did that program, was that as long as there is oil in the ground to drill,
Yep,
it'll be consumed,
that's right.
and everything else will be put on hold
That's right.
until we've depleted this resource.
That's right.
Well,
Well, that's what Tillerson wants.
that's what I'm saying. The
Yeah.
guy's the head of a oil company.
Okay, well, let's get some. He's an Eagle Scout. He's a Texan.
A Texan.
Yeah, he does business with. He wants business with Russia. He wants to do business with Putin.
Yeah.
This is where the Putin rumor is. This is the rumor that Trump might make a deal with Russia. Okay. Now he's going to be opposed by the New York Times and every Jew in America. Because
Washington Post.
the Washington Post, they're going to oppose him. whether they can do it or not. And here's another interesting thing. He's not only an Eagle Scout, he gives money to the United Negro College Fund. He has to cover his behind, with some tokenism. He's not anti-black. He's married. He has 4 children. That takes care of the sex problem. And he's going to ride out the storm. And last year, the petroleum giant, Exxon, made $16 billion last year. and that's what his earnings are, much more than the previous 2 years, you see. So the oil is going to boom again. That's what he's banking on. Anyway, it's a joke. It's a joke to me. It just says that Trump is in total confusion. He may go with him and he may not.
I don't know about that. That's not my assessment. I think he knows exactly what he's doing.
Well,
there may be a few things that David's pointed out that he might not have a clue
I make no
on,
predictions.
But, I would say that this is calculated.
Well, that I can't assume that the Taiwan phone call wasn't calculated either. I mean, I wonder about that. I wonder about him trying to cozy up to Russia speaking of balance of power, cozying up so much to Putin as he has been doing, while directly provoking China, as he's done. Is that an attempt to drive a wedge between the alliance between Russia and China? Because it would appear that way.
Good question.
Well, Russia plays the balance of power. And Russia...
That's the other option, is that Russia is manipulating him into
Russia
this somehow.
isn't that powerful. Russia is faced by Japan on the Pacific coast and the United States fleet on the Pacific coast and Korea. And Russia also faces the perennial German question. Russia is a landlocked. It's one of the 7 great powers, potential powers, but it's probably number 7. Okay. Germany's ahead. The United States is ahead.
Well, yeah, as an economic force.
China is equal almost. Because the Chinese have the number 1 army.
Well,
At
Robert, let me interject this. There's economic powers and then there's military powers.
That's correct.
Right.
So what are Soviet assets? Oil in the ground. But they have to import the technology from the United States or Germany or Japan. They are technologically behind China. They're technologically behind Japan. They're technologically behind most everybody. That's why the oil prices are so low. It's pressure on Soviet Union to see if they can't drive the Soviet Union out of Syria. That's the attempt of the Obama administration. Is to support Syria. And of course, the Israelis want to support Syria.
Well, it's a real conflict there.
Yeah, the Israelis don't trust Russians. That's clear.
Right. And I think they have reason.
Now, Trump can make a deal with Russia if he wants to. But if he makes a deal with Russia, he's going to have problems with China and with Germany. He's not going. It's not clear sailing that the Russian tie with Trump would work. The United States cannot be a global power. Russia does not want to be a global power. It wants a sphere of influence. It's hoping to keep the Ukraine in its sphere, and he thinks that the United States, particularly Biden, wants to support the Ukraine in order to weaken Russia. That's based on outdated thinking.
Yeah.
That's based on the thinking of the 1950s. So Russia can hold its own as a defensive, internal, underdeveloped power, but it's not in. He's got 3 or 4 bigger powers. The Russians have 3 or 4 bigger powers, including the United States fleet, the United States Air Force, and the United States has more allies than Russia. Russia can't get allies.
Right, that's true.
Whose ally they're going to get?
Right.
They don't want to go with the Japanese. Now, they've been going with the Chinese.
Yeah.
They think there can be a...
I wonder if they
But-
import a lot of goods from China.
But that's only a temporary deal.
Yeah.
That's a yearly basis.
Yeah. Robert, we got about 2 minutes remaining in the program, so why don't you, in a minute, sum up what you want to say, and then let's let David have a minute.
Okay, well, I've been trying to talk about how Trump, at the moment, has got an indeterminate foreign policy. He doesn't have any sense of priorities. Is it China, Mexico, the Middle East? Does he want to go into war with Syria? What does he want to do about this global empire? The Russians are not claiming the globe, and the Chinese are not claiming the globe. They are claiming a sphere of influence limited by geography, and neither are the Germans. The Germans are not interested. They're interested in holding back the Russians, yes, but they're not interested. The Germans and the British will not support an American war in the Middle East. They're saying if you fight in the Middle East, you fight with your own boys. We're not doing it.
David, do you want to conclude the program?
Yeah, well, I agree with the professor here. I think that his foreign policy program so far is incomprehensible. I don't know what he's trying to do or why yet. I know that he started off on what I would consider an unduly aggressive foreign policy posture, but I'm not sure what the purpose is, and I suspect we're going to have to find out.
After 100 days.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic, but I guess we'll see. Either way, we'll have to keep the conversation going, as always,
Right.
because debate, as you say, is the oxygen of democracy,
Yes.
and we will keep the debate
We
going.
will have more foreign policy next week.
Sounds good. Thank you, Professor.